The declaration is an important one because of the situation of the Caribbean and our own vulnerabilities. It's also an important one because internationally, this year in Paris in December, there's a major gathering to discuss climate change, one that could actually change the future and the way that we're relating with our planet and our ecosystem. But also because in June this year, or later this month, the Holy Father is going to be issuing an encyclical on climate change that has been greatly anticipated by many, many people around the world, both in the Catholic world, but also people in the ecological world who really are looking forward to his statements to help balance the equation and help the world to understand that the challenges that we have in climate right now are not just technical challenges, these are also moral challenges, but more importantly, these are spiritual challenges. That when we don't care for the environment, that is really not caring for the gift that God has given to us, but it is fundamentally not understanding the relationship that God has expected with us and nature, us and ourselves, us and God, and our neighbor. And in breaking these four relationships, we have really done a lot of damage to the climate, but that has impacted on us, but also it's impacting significantly on generations coming after us. Are we handing the planet to the next generation in a better condition than we received it? I'd like to read just one section from the document, number 6. The sad reality is that the ones who are affected most by this climate change are the poor, and they are least responsible for the reality. The few dozen island states across the world, for example, have neither the size nor the development history to have been major contributors to the current climate change. Yet these small island states are the most easily devastated by rising seas and harsher storms. Already some villages have disappeared by disaster, both stormy and by those with slow creeping ones. Our brothers and sisters who inhabit these places will be in peril through no fault of their own. We recognize that climate change represents a significant threat to the sustainability of Caribbean life as we know it. Our nations are already impacted by unusually heavy rainfall, warmer temperatures, rising sea levels, and the prospect of more intense storm events. Though we concentrate on the Caribbean region, we are mindful that we are part of a planet. This sense of the urgency of reflection on climate change is because of a global challenge that we face. But this global challenge is going to impact directly on Caribbean people. In a map I saw on the most vulnerable places, the Caribbean is number 2 on that map of most vulnerable places to be affected by climate change, by rising sea levels. And already in the Caribbean, we've had very strange weather patterns like the heavy rainfalls December 2013 that affected St. Vincent and St. Lucia and parts of Dominica. So these things together bring us to understand that there is a significant challenge that we face with climate change, and the bishops of the region are very interested that we lend our voice and that our governments really support measures going forward to negotiate with the international community to reduce the impact of our impress on the climate by reducing the temperature, by committing to especially the vulnerable communities, by committing to certain agreed levels of emission for all countries, by committing that those countries most affected who have contributed the least will have the funding from the international community to deal with some of these things. So based on that, I will hand over to you by saying that this document, as has been issued this week on climate change, is not our first. In 2005, the bishops of the region issued this document, Caring for the Earth, Our Responsibility, and I'll invite Bishop Dickson to speak a bit to that and give us some other practical things on climate and the challenges.
About 2003 or so, the bishops of the region issued a statement on stewardship. And the point was made after that statement that stewardship is a much wider concept than just how members of a congregation exercise stewardship in their parish, which was part of the statement. And the point was made that stewardship embraces the way we relate with the entire universe. And the suggestion was made that we go into that concept of how we relate with the entire universe, really study it, and make a statement publishing our concerns as to what was happening at the moment, what can be done in the future, but also and significantly indicating that we, the Catholic bishops of the Caribbean, are interested in beginning a regional and international dialogue on the whole issue of the ecology. And so we looked at the various things that were happening as a result of climate change in the world and in the region. We looked at things that could have been done. We examined the relationship between ourselves and other aspects of nature, and we came up with a program of what we could do using the facilities at our disposal, namely our schools, our parishes, our education programs, our youth work, other fora, to begin implementing a change in the way we regard and we relate with the rest of creation. So that was in 2005. Now, the urgency that the bishops came back to this topic really is because we wanted to make a contribution to the discussion prior to December 2015. Over the past few years, there have been 20 gatherings of what has been called the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And these conferences have been trying to come up with a means of delaying the natural process of climate change. I say delaying because we recognize that human activity has contributed tremendously to the warming of the planet. And the meeting in December of the international community is to really bring about an internationally binding agreement to cut the amount of greenhouse gases that we humans are producing into the atmosphere. So, you know, we often don't recognize the importance of the contribution of carbon dioxide or the burning of fossil fuel. Fossil fuel includes gas, petroleum, it includes oil, and it includes some, I think those are the basic things. Coal, petroleum, which includes natural gas and so on. Now, we use these things every single day. Right now, we're burning fossil fuel by using our air conditioning. Right now, the very electricity that we're using is burning fossil fuel. Our transportation is based on petroleum. We're burning fossil fuel. So in our daily lives, we're causing these gases to rise into the atmosphere, which creates a band preventing the heat from getting out. And the heat is being captured, and the planet is warming, warming, warming. And the results of climate warming, global warming, are devastating. We've seen droughts, we've seen more frequent hurricanes, we've seen migration of people as a result of these droughts. So it's quite devastating. Our production of food is going to be affected the hotter the planet gets. There was a piece in The Advocate just on May the 7th, which indicated that the average global climate change, the average global carbon dioxide has hit 400.83 parts per million. Now, this degree of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has never reached that point before. The point was made that prior to pre-human existence, before humans came on Earth, it took 6,000 years for carbon dioxide to reach 80 parts per million. 80 parts per million. In the past 35 years alone, the level of carbon dioxide has risen to 61 parts per million. Now we're up to 400. We really can't go any further in the warming of the planet without devastating consequences to the whole planet and therefore to us. And so in December, we really have to, the decision makers really have to come to grips with a practical, legally binding way of controlling the emissions of carbon dioxide. Let us not forget the other gas, which is methane. Methane is produced by the landfills. Methane is produced by the emissions from cattle. This also contributes to the heating of the earth. So in December, some serious decisions have to be made. Now, one interesting thing is that the recent G7 meeting has indicated that by the end of this century, we have to phase out fossil fuel. By the end of this century, fossil fuel will no longer be a factor. But let me tell you something. By the end of this century, unless we control the rise of carbon dioxide, at the end of this century, civilization and the planet will have a totally different look.
Look differently.
And humans may not even be around.
Yeah. It is a very serious challenge and crisis. In fact, in a presentation we had as the bishops in Jamaica, the person who was speaking to us said the 14 hottest years on record since temperatures have been taken are all been in this century. the last 14 to 15 years of the last 14 years on record. And that means that the heating up of the climate is very, very significant. I'll ask Glenda to speak to us on the stewardship dimension of this challenge of climate change, that this is not just a technical challenge, this is also a matter of our spirituality and of our understanding of who we are with God.
Thank you very much, Bishop Jason. Good morning, everyone. As Bishop Dickson also mentioned in his introductory remarks, the basis of stewardship is really grounded in the scriptures, grounded in the Bible. And fundamentally, God has given us all of these resources, this beautiful planet. And the responsibility was for us to look after the planet for the common good, for all of mankind. We also have a responsibility to look after each other and to care for all of the human beings who are also here on this planet. But what we have therefore seen by virtue of the human activity, that the impact of the degradation has in fact meant that you've had more global warming. You've also then seen, as Bishop Jason just mentioned, the climate change, which is impacting agriculture, is impacting our quarries, is impacting tourism. And that in itself is therefore impacting human activity and also our opportunity as countries to have viable economies. Bishop mentioned when he read the statement that the AC bishops have recognized that small island states such as Barbados and such as the Caribbean would be the ones who would be primarily affected, notwithstanding the fact that the activities may not necessarily have generated within our area. But it is therefore very important as citizens, as God's creatures, as Christians, for us to each make a contribution towards, in our own small way, to ensure that we try to harness the concern and the damage that has been taking place. We may not think that our little contribution could make a difference, but rest assured it can. And the urgency that we're now seeing towards the Paris conference at the end of this year, I think demonstrates that there is a concern that each and every one of us need to take on board.